In this session, we're going to focus more on if, then, and else statements and how we can use these statements within our VBA coding to accommodate different conditions to run certain types of code. If you recall in the last session, we talked more about um, using variants and input boxes to intake user information within the macro program and how we can also automate VLOOKUPs to populate this template. And I can just quickly run the macro for you and show what it was doing. So in short, what it was doing, it was grabbing the customer articles that we wanted to process within our template, uploading our input information from the variant box, and then automating these VLOOKUPs, and finally autofilling the information. We're going to continue with this macro, but we're going to integrate an if then statement to accommodate for customer information that we may not have. If you look in row 14, we have a column called other, but there's no information populated for this column. So what the question is, how do we deal with an other customer or a new customer? And we're going to find out. To begin off, we're going to have a breakdown of the if then else statement. So here's just a brief overview of what if and then statements are. Um, in pretty much all programming languages, we use incorporate if and then statements. And if and then statements are just pretty much logic. It shows how decisions are made within a programming language or within a program. And we use if and then statements in our everyday lives. When we make decisions, when we make decisions, when we choose to do something or we choose not to do something, we often base it on certain criteria. So we'll just give an example of an if and then statement. Here's an example. Picture this. You're on a road trip. I don't know, maybe coming back from New York, or maybe you just gone a few hours away and you're on a road trip and you're coming home, and one of your friends or family members are like, hey, maybe if you have time, we can check out this restaurant that's on the way back in between where we are and our house. And this is also an example of an if and then statement. So the criteria is we have time, if we have time, then on the way back we go to the famous restaurant. So if we have time, we're gonna go to the famous restaurant. So that's the if and then statement. And if there is no time, we're just gonna go straight home. So the criteria is if time is met, then we go to the restaurant. Criteria of time is not met, then we go straight home. So this is an example of a if and then statement that is what we use every day within our lives. Now, if then and else statements. So pretty much the same. These are functions that run actions or codes only if certain conditions are met. So pretty much what happens with the if and then and else statement. If something happens, then we do this. If not, if it doesn't happen, then we're going to do something else. So, a similar example from a day to day example. If, picture this, you're at home and somebody took the car and you're waiting for the car. You're not sure when brother's going to come home with the car, when your dad's going to come home with the car. So, you're waiting for the car to make plans for the evening. So, in this situation, here's an if and then statement. If my brother comes home with the car, if I have the car, then I'll go to the restaurant with friends. Otherwise, or else, if we don't have the car, we will just get pizza delivered, and yeah. So we got it. If we have the car, then we'll go to the restaurant. Or else, if we don't have the car, we'll just get pizza delivered. And then at the end of the day, you're just going to end up going, or you're going to be at home after that. So if you go to the restaurant, you're just going to end up at home. And if you get pizza delivered, you'll still be at home at the end of the day. So this is a similar programming language. This is similar to a programming language. If a condition is met, we're going to do this section of code, the restaurant section of code, and then we're going to just finish off the code at home. Or if you don't have the car, we're going to just get the pizza section of the code and we just finish the code at home. So they're going to end up at the same place. In the if, then, and else statement, they'll take two different paths, but they'll end up at the same place. So something I want to incorporate within future videos of mine is a problem and solution statement. And as I mentioned in the earlier part of the video, that we want to accommodate new customers or customers that we have with no information and pull this information within to our template. So to do this, we need to determine if we have the specific entered customer code that the user inputted within the variant box. So we're going to first create an if and then statement. Then we will assign a new code value of O if depending if we have that specific customer code information. And then we'll create a series of questions. If it's determined that we don't have this specific customer code, we'll assign it as a value of O. And then we'll create a series of questions. I'll prompt the user using variant boxes, using input boxes that will get the required template information. So customer number, ship to, sell to, and we'll assign these values to cells, and then we'll exit the if and then statement and allow the remaining code to continue. Let's just summarize again. How are we going to accommodate new customer information? We're going to determine if you have entered the if you have the we're going to determine if you have the entered customer code. If we do, then we'll just run the code normally. If we don't, we're gonna have to assign a new value of O to that customer code, create a series of questions to determine the specific required template information for that new customer code or the other customer code, and assign these values to a cell, and then exit the if statement and continue the program as normally and populate the template with VLOOKUPs and autofill it. So that's that, and in the next session we're just going to jump into the code. Okay, here just to visualize a code, if you were to enter something that is not in one of these rows, not in the customer info chart, this is what happens. A bunch of VLOOKUP errors. Why? Because there's no coding, no information for customer code 9H. Now to resolve that, we'll have to create a if-then statement. Let's step into the code, Alt F11, and we're going to create an if-then statement right here, right after we ask the program, the user, what is a customer code. And the logic behind this is first we're going to have to determine if said code exists within our customer information table. So how can we do that? There's multiple ways, but I'm just going to use one of the simplest ways. So for example, L3, okay. Customer code, okay. And then exist. For example, let's put 1P and count if, use a simple count if formula to determine if a customer code exists within this column A. Okay, and it equals to 4, I believe. Yeah, so P is there, so we get a count of 1. No, let's try 4P. 1. Let's try 9P. 0. Okay, so this is what's going to, we're going to use this formula to gauge if that inputted customer code exists within this column, exists within our table. Now let's step into the code. So we're going to create an if then statement. If first we have to assign whatever code the customer entered into this cell over here, L4. Or we can make it L3. Sheets. So code L3. So move this a bit up. So whatever the user enters, it's going to become cell L3. Now here's our if statement. If sheets customer info range 0, then code equals O. So what this does, checks the value of L3, which in turn checking if the inputted code exists in the chart. So if it's 0, that means it doesn't exist. Not exist. We'll turn the code into O. So turn this into O. If it's 1, it exists. If it's 0, doesn't exist. So that's what the if then statement is doing. So what we now need to do is create a series of variant boxes that will request the user for customer information here. So I can do that very quickly. So I've created all the variant type variables for the respective columns that we need the customer information for. So this includes customer number, distribution channel, region, ship to, and sell to. Very similar formula, just dimming each variable name as a variant. Okay, this first step. Create variant type variables for the required columns. Second step is to pretty much ask the user questions to enter the required information. To do that, create input boxes which we equate the variant variables with. Here is customer name, number equals input box, have the question in quotation marks. Then lastly, just pretty much getting the whatever's entered in the input box and assigning it to column 14, the column of code O. So go to its respective column. Was in the input box row 14 or row O for other to its respective information column. Always remember to close the if statement. So what this does is, if we just to summarize, if you don't have this customer code that the user inputted, the macro program will pretty much create new variables for each of those columns, ask a customer to input the required information for those columns, and then assign that information to row other or row 14. So this will allow, and then we end the if statement. And then the code just continues as normal. It will pretty much the range A2 will become O. So this will become O now because we've assigned it as O because it wasn't in our original list. And it'll just execute as normal. VLOOKUPs, and then autofill. And that's pretty much it. And here it is in action. Just a correction over here. This should be cell L2 because the cell that we're actually checking using count if statement is actually L2 and not L4. Now to see this macro in action, for example, a customer that we know 1P automates very quickly. Now for a new customer, for example, Walmart, we don't know, so it's going to ask us a customer number. We can say 1, 2, 3, 4. We can say 5. Customer region, we can say 25. Ship to, we can say 5, 6, 7, 8. And this week, yep. And it populated. Now, obviously, I just put a apostrophe here, so I can just correct that accidentally. And that's pretty much it. That's it. So I can take in any other customer and I'll just assign it to this row over here. So if you found this if then breakdown helpful, let me know in the comments, subscribe, like.